So let's move on. Let's talk about an overview of what's in store for us. So in the first section, we're going to talk about nutrition and neurotransmitters. I'm going to introduce you to the idea that much of what we take for granted in modern psychopharmacology actually originates from very, very basic nutritional concepts. And specifically the idea that these neurotransmitters, which are the key chemical messengers for our brain, originate from the protein in our diet. And we're going to take a look at how intense that connection really is. It's a tight connection, and it's one that is in delicate balance with our diet. If our diet is off just by a bit, our neurotransmitters are off, sometimes by a lot. In the second section, we're going to talk about the connection between inflammation and mood. You know, again, we used to think that treating anxiety and depression was all about balancing your neurotransmitters. In fact, some of us may even still think that. But the fact of the matter is that it's much more complicated and complex than that. It turns out that inflammation seems to be a key factor in the pathogenesis and development of depression. But it's not just depression, it's many other chronic diseases that are associated with inflammation. Things like asthma, coronary artery disease, rheumatoid arthritis, many other, dementia is another example. These all have in common the fact that they stem from chronic inflammation. And I'll be introducing you to ideas about how you can reduce inflammation, not just through your food choices, but by how you move your body. And we'll be talking just a tad bit about how to integrate movement strategies with eating strategies in a way to reduce overall systemic inflammation. In the third section, we're going to talk about stress-related eating and appetite. And I'll introduce you to the idea that mindless eating is not only bad for our health, but it's bad for our mental health as well. That we need to be mindful of not only what we eat, but how we eat, who we eat with. And the whole idea here is that if we can eat with more mindfulness, with more attention, we'll make better food choices, and more importantly, we'll eliminate a lot of those stress hormones that are going around our brain, floating around our brain, when we're really not paying attention to what's going on. I'll share with you some interesting studies that look exactly at what's going on when the stress response is moving full steam ahead, and introduce you to some techniques on how to cut it short. In our section on blood sugar, brain, and behavior, I'll give you some very practical strategies on how to balance blood sugar. Strategies that you probably haven't heard about, I'd venture to say, just based on what I've heard from other audiences. And these strategies have been examined in well-designed, controlled clinical trials, and they work. And I suspect that the only reason why more people don't know about them is that you can't really get a patent on these strategies and market them as a drug, although some people are still trying. I mean, these are naturally occurring compounds. And it's really hard to get a patent on a naturally occurring compound that's already been in widespread use. So I'll teach you about how to balance blood sugar and why it's so important to do so. And in the final section, optimizing sleep and awareness, we'll put all of this information together, and we'll look at how we can integrate our diet and movement strategies in a way that will enhance our attention and concentration during the day. So what can we do about this? Well, there's a lot of things that we can do, but first and foremost, we can adopt a diet that is high in anti-inflammatory nutrients. So the diet that often comes to mind is the Mediterranean diet. And the Mediterranean diet is something that has been studied. It's been looked at more than 1.5 million healthy adults so far, and the number is growing. And generally speaking, what is found is that following a Mediterranean diet is associated with a reduced risk of overall cardiovascular mortality. It's also associated with a reduced risk of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Now, what highlights the Mediterranean diet, which I'll show you in the next slide, is the inclusion of a lot of these anti-inflammatory food products. So one staple of the anti-inflammatory diet is the inclusion of colorful fruits and vegetables as well as fish. The anti-inflammatory diets also include spices like sage, ginger, chili peppers, and curcumin, which again have all been shown to have quite a potent anti-inflammatory effect. Dark chocolate, interestingly enough, more recent addition, has been found to have more of an antioxidant effect than we once thought. It can also lower blood pressure and has a positive effect on mood through the introduction of a compound called phenylethylamine, which is basically nature's stimulant. So, again, essential features of a Mediterranean diet, and here's what the Mediterranean diet actually looks like. So at the core of the Mediterranean diet is the inclusion of colorful fruits and vegetables, grains, beans, and olive oil. Next up on the ladder, we have fish and seafood. Fish and seafood, remember, is rich in omega-3 fatty acids. And then finally, up closer to the top, you have just a provision for fewer dairy products, not much, but just a few. And then meat and sweets are in very minor amounts, maybe once a week at most. Among the sweets that are included, chocolate, simple chocolate. So we're going to learn about chocolate later on and why it's so important, but this is the essential feature of the Mediterranean diet.